Welcome everybody to our regularly scheduled AMA community call. We don't have a specific topic today, but we'll be taking questions from anybody who's here. So I'm here. I'm the founder of BrightID. Nice to meet you all. I'm Adam, and I see Philip over here. He's been with BrightID for quite a long time, probably about 3 years now. And Carlos is coming in right now, so he's another BrightID core team member. But yeah, we're very happy to have you here and answer any questions you may have about BrightID, and we can talk about any hot topics in the unique personhood space in Web3. So yeah, happy to talk about any of that stuff. So what do you guys have on your mind today? This lovely February the 10th.
I'll jump in. I'm excited that SongADAO had its first BrightID enabled snapshot vote yesterday.
Yeah, so that's pretty historic that we had a snapshot vote that the only participants, and actually I can post a link to it in here, but if you look up SongADAO on Snapshot, you can find their DAO there as well. But the cool thing is that you have to be BrightID verified to participate in this vote. So that's pretty cool, and I hope that there's been demand for something similar. So I hope that from other DAOs, so I hope that other DAOs will be able to use the same strategy that they built. I think the UI, so they built a nice UI. It works pretty well. There's a bunch of steps. We're trying to cut those down a little bit, but if you're totally new to Web3, it's like, holy cow, I've got to install BrightID, I've got to install MetaMask, I've got to like add this network, so there's like 7 steps or something. I got to, scan this NFT or scan this QR code. I've got to buy an NFT. Well, you should do that anyway. You should buy a SongADAO NFT anyway. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of steps that you've got to do. So hey, good to see you, Billy. Yeah, but if you go through those steps, I mean, for me, it was easy because I've done all that stuff. So I just like within a minute, I checked all 7 boxes on the UI page to get registered into Snapshot. And then after that, it's pretty sweet. I get to have one person, one vote, just like he said in one of his songs, one person, one vote. Pretty cool. So I think that works really well for SongADAO. SongADAO is a project where you buy an NFT to get in. So the problem with some of the one person, one vote is it's like it loses out on some of the value you get from people having skin in the game. And so I really like the snap. I think SongADAO's snapshot idea and their snapshot strategy is really a great merger of using some that you have to do something or buy something, and then you have to prove you're a unique person. So in their case, you have to either buy one of the SongADAO NFTs to show your support for SongADAO, or you can there's like a work your way in, because SongADAO is all about promoting daily creativity. So you can work your way in. You just say, I'm going to do this thing every day for a month and provide evidence of it, and then you can earn your way into the DAO that way. So if you're, I think that's something that most people can probably think of, something that they're willing to just do consistently for a month and then earn their way in that way. So it's really cool. So you've got like, proof of human work / proof of NFT plus BrightID for uniqueness. I think it's a really great combination, and I hope that other DAOs will follow suit. So very exciting. Oh, I see some questions already popping up. So is this the platform that discuss how to move tokens from Mana? Yeah, so we can talk about, we can't talk about details in Mana because I'm not up to speed on the details of how to migrate your token. But
I can say one overarching
go
thing
ahead.
about that.
Yep.
So at this point with Mana, my understanding is if you had tokens on the Mana-based website, those are the only tokens that are possible to migrate at this point. If you had them in other places, they're gonna be migratable, but they're not today. But if you had them on Manabase, then you should be able to access their site, go through the provided your BrightID validated, do the swap. But it's only those that were on the Manabase site, and only if you have BrightID verified.
Okay, so does that answer your question, Granny Crypto? Or do you still have a question about Mana? Okay, just let us know because yeah, I mean, Philip and I are both also on the board of Hedge for Humanity, so we do. Although maybe we don't know every single detail about Mana, we do know quite a bit about it. So obviously, okay, good. All right, that's okay. That answers the question.
Yeah, so just go to manabase.com and follow the instructions there, and hopefully it'll be fairly. Probably the two parts where people are likely to get tripped up is either getting BrightID verified, but if you're here, that's the kind of thing you should be able to do. If you've made connections before, great, you should be already good. If not, go to a connection party, that'll solve that. And you will need to add ID chain to MetaMask, but the website walks it through pretty simply how to do that.
Yep. So Cody has a question about integration. I was looking to integrate BrightID into my project, but I'm struggling to find documentation for unverified projects starting seed groups. If my project has not been verified by BrightID, do I have to fork a node and host it by myself? No. So yeah, like a lot of projects integrating with BrightID, that's one of their first questions. Do I have to run a node? You can run a node, and we encourage it, but that doesn't need to be the first step. That's something you can do later on after you become more familiar with BrightID. We definitely love to have more decentralization. So yes, please run a node if you figure out how to do it, but that's not required. What you can do is you can choose nodes, existing nodes to use for your to have your users link to when they. So we have instructions in the dev guide how to create a universal link that links to a BrightID node, and then they can link to your project through that BrightID node. So yeah, and you can even pick multiple BrightID nodes. But anyways, so that's that. And then you also asked about seed groups. So the power of seed groups is it allows your community through its sort of natural connection making and people knowing each other, those relationships. It uses those pre-existing relationships to build the web of trust that BrightID uses, and it allows you to instead of kind of handing people off to BrightID meets, which is kind of like the default place where people end up if they don't know anyone on BrightID, if they kind of like just stumbled into BrightID and don't know anyone to connect to, that's where they end up. Instead of sending people there, you can use existing connections in your community to get people verified. We just have to know about your community. You request a quota. So I'm going to put in, a link to that in the chat, the seed nomination form. And if you have any questions, just come by our Discord and we can help you fill that out. But yeah, that's a way to, let's say you have a Discord and you have like a regular meeting like this, and you want to allow people to connect through that, or maybe there's some other way that people are already getting to know each other in your project's network, then you can leverage that to get people verified rather than sending them to BrightID meetings. And then those BrightID meetings are kind of deprecated anyway. We really want to shift to more of a existing relationships. It's not really ideal to have people connecting to, someone that they just met to get verified. That's not the the long-term future of BrightID. So let me know, Cody, if that helps, and if you have more questions, because we can probably go into a lot more like specific stuff for your project. So I would encourage you to come by our Discord and choose, when you self-select the role for yourself in our Discord, choose the integrator role, and then ask your questions and how to integrate. We'll help you. We can help you set up a seed group. We can help you add the BrightID integration for your project so that people can link and use BrightID with your project. Okay, so I would like to, welcome the new people who have come in just now. We're just asking and answering questions about BrightID, really anything that's on our mind right now. Oh, so ETH Denver is coming up, so that's another topic on people's mind. I feel really sad that I don't get to go, but I'm happy that Billy here is going to represent us. That's pretty awesome. Do you want to talk to us about, like, I don't know, ETH Denver? What are you excited about? What are you like, what are you gonna be doing there?
Sure. So I mean, I couldn't make it last week, like my work schedule. This is like 11 o'clock my time, so it's like I'm so hit or miss with the meeting.
Oh, okay.
But I couldn't make it, so like I really try to rush on here to catch up on BrightID. So last week, did a hackathon with the Polygon ETH, like a couple of those guys that like Web 2 to road ETH map or something, like whatever it was called. Anyways, it was cool. I met like Superfluid guys, and it was really cool. So I was like, all right, I wasn't planning on doing the hackathon for ETH Denver, but it looks like I am, to keep building off and doing things like that. And it's leading me to like a project of like what to like integrate with BrightID, because I wanted to integrate something with the NFBs project that I did. And like I was looking into like the ID chain, and like, because I don't actually have a project to build to integrate BrightID with yet. So I was like, okay, well, now I can use this hackathon project that I'm working with to like basically have the bees be my playroom, and then integrate a BrightID like through like some kind of share funding through suit. So it's a lot. Anyways, I'm really glad that my BrightID t-shirt and sweatshirt came in. So if you will be in BrightID, I will have a big, huge orange BrightID.
Denver.
And I will have the idea with the sticker on my name tag. So if I make a connection with somebody, I'll give you a sticker, and then you could connect with other people there too. And pretty much just download your app, and then just kind of explain like what BrightID is and what they're trying to do. And pretty much like my part into it, of how I got integrated to it and how I learned about it. And basically using the app itself showed me, I started with OneHive and the faucet, but then I learned about Rabbit Hole, and then I learned about Gitcoin, and then I learned just from the app itself, just because I went through the steps of doing the BrightID. So my goal is, meet and greet with a lot of people. And then as I meet and greet with them, they're going to say, I noticed your bright shirt or bright sweatshirt, what is that about? And then me and Adam, we got some stickers. So I have some stickers to be able to hand out, and a few of the guys I know that are going to ETH Denver will probably help me out with that as well. So it'll be fun. It'll be cool. It'll be my first time doing something like this. I was still kind of iffy, COVID, no COVID, but I was like, man, I just got to go for it. So, I'm going out, I'll be N95ing, and, I got my vaccine shot and all that to the max. So let's see how it goes.
Nice. That sounds awesome. Yeah, that's so cool that you kind of got sucked into working on a project. That's amazing. And I hope you have I hope you come up with something really good, build something really cool.
Adam,
and yeah, we'll be around to help with that.
It seems to me that having Billy be in a seed group would be really good idea for.
Oh, absolutely.
Billy
Yeah,
to
yeah.
help people get verified.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I mean, just to throw the idea out there of something that kind of came up with the whole Superfluid. It's going to be like a test run to like, I want to BrightID faucet it, but DAOs have a lot of problems bootstrapping liquidity. Right now there's a lot of shared liquidity with DAOs or anything like that. But you have devs that get paid in, let's say, BrightID token, right? I pay him $100, but he needs to pay the bills or he needs to eat. He's going to dump the token, so it puts a lot of sell pressure on it. So what I've kind of learned about Superfluid is like you can actually have NFTs, and instead of having like an Olympus DAO kind of system, you could sell the NFT and have a Superfluid stream going to the NFT itself, and you can have that, vested for a year, 2 years, or anything. So now you can buy that NFT at discount with a stable coin, and then that's getting, flowed through for a year, let's say, and it's getting BrightID token. And then whoever owns the NFT, if they wanted to sell it or do anything because they needed to cash out, they could sell it to another person, and that person that owns the NFT then gets that, BrightID token flow. But now BrightID has sold these NFTs, and now they have stable coins to now pay their, devs or whoever they need to pay with. So there's no sell pressure on the BrightID, and now you have this vested, token hold for about 2 years that can be cashed out, by the day or by the second. But now there's another kind of way to slow down that sell pressure for the internal team that, thrives on their token. So that's my idea that I'm working with. So far it's been pretty cool. Like, just learning that I can even do this with NFTs on this first part was like huge. And then I was like, wait a minute, so it's been pretty cool. Yeah.
Billy, do you know the project Block Zero?
I've heard of it, but I don't know much details about it.
Not all that complexity, but they did a cool NFT project called Cryptonauts, with gorgeous artwork. And what they did is each of those NFTs contains a whole bunch of their underlying token. So the like base level ones contain 1,000, and the fancier ones contain 10,000, and the fanciest ones contain 100,000. Just like tokens embedded in the NFT, and they auctioned those off. And at any time you could burn the NFT to just take all those, to access all of those tokens. But it's just like, it's a way to have a token sink, because you could take it apart for the component piece, but hopefully you won't. You'll just like keep it as the NFT. And ideally that wrapped pile of tokens with a pretty picture on it is like worth more than the unwrapped tokens without the pretty picture on it.
That's pretty cool for like a speculative idea. It's like, well, if I have faith in the project, if I hold the NFT, it might be worth more. It might have a better floor than selling all these tokens and dumping them. That's pretty cool. I have to check it out.
And I think what they did is right. So they auctioned them for ETH, and then they took the ETH and they spent all the ETH market buying the token. So it like drove up token price. So it created buy pressure without, and like pushed that sell pressure hopefully long into the future. And if people stop valuing the NFT based on if the value of the NFT becomes more than that like thing that it contains, then great. Then no one's ever going to break it apart. So those tokens never get sold. But they backstop the value of the NFT, because at a minimum, even if people stop liking the pretty picture, you could always rip the thing open and just cash out the tokens. Let me send you a link just so you see it.
Yeah. I've got so many like links and so many things that I think are so cool that I have to like dig deep into. It's just so crazy.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what ETH Denver does for the B2 verification, because I think you'll have like this tight cluster of people that actually know each other, making connections on BrightID. And it'll be cool to kind of watch that happen in real time, watch the B2 graph get strengthened. So yeah, I think that'll be cool, but I think Philip's right. We also want to add we want to add you to a seed group. So I think I'm asking that in the stars channel in our Discord, if we can get you added to a seed group. So we'll make that happen, Billy.
Okay, yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, Billy, we'll definitely do that, and we appreciate all that you've been contributing to the ecosystem. I wonder, Adam, so we could certainly add him to an existing seed group. I also sort of wonder if it could make sense to have one like for this purpose, so that it's easier to see, sort of like kind of an event specific one. So it'd be easy to like isolate on the graph how trust is rating it specifically from this group.
Yeah, I mean, I would be in favor of that if we could sort of plan out who would be in that seed group, because I think seed groups should have, I think 3 3 members is
Mhm.
at a minimum. I think like 1 or 2 is probably too small
Yeah,
for a
we-
seed group. We
Right,
don't,
yeah,
I don't
we
think we've done
definitely
that in the
have 3
past.
plus close friends, going to ETH Denver.
Yeah, so if you want to like figure out who should be in that seed group, we can do that. We can create a new seed group just for them. That way you eat that, like you said, you can kind of see that activity on the graph, like see what's coming out of that particular seed group. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I know there's going to be a couple guys from Gitcoin that I know that will be there, and a few one hivers too that will be there too. So if it becomes difficult, I'm pretty sure they're all verified through BrightID. So if it becomes something that we can't have enough, or something we can maybe, is there an attempt seed group option just to see the data on it, just to see how that would pan out?
No, I think what we're gonna do, just to make sure that it actually happens, is we'll just add you to an existing one, and then if we like, if someone figures out like, okay, this should be these people, these 3 or 4 people or whatever should be the seed, this new seed group, and I don't know what we can call it. We can call it like the ETH Denver seed group. Yeah, so actually, I mean, I said no about the temporary seed group, but seed groups basically they have a quota, and then they get refilled. So you could actually have one that was just for one event, have a certain quota, like we think we're going to connect to 300 people, and
Don't
then
refill it.
yeah, just don't refill it. So yeah, we could definitely do that. We haven't done it before, but we could definitely do it.
Yeah, let me know. I mean, basically, I don't leave to ETH Denver until basically a week from now. So we have till Thursday I get there. I put my foot on the ground in Colorado.
Yeah, so we'll try to have this set up ahead of time. So for now, we'll get you set up in a regular, just BrightID star seed group, and then within a week, we'll see if we can create a temporary ETH Denver seed group. That'd be cool. I love the, like, that was my first taste of like really using BrightID, was going to Ericon back in, what was that, 2020? 2019, actually. Wow.
2019.
Wow, 3 years. Yeah, 3 years ago, we went to Ericon, and we yeah, it was so much fun. Philip and I were the ones wearing orange shirts. People were coming up to us. We were making connections. It was so much fun meeting people, chatting with people. I don't know. I've never felt so popular wearing that shirt, like having people flock to me and making connections, getting to know me. It was really cool. So it's like BrightID is way more fun in person. I mean, it's still cool to like meet random people and make connections in Zoom meetings, but yeah, in person is just really cool.
Yeah,
So
it's fun. And then like you start scanning QR codes, and people like see that you're doing it, and then they're like want to get in on it. They're like, oh, I want to, whatever it is you're doing, I want to do it too.
That's the goal. I'm really hoping to like meet a lot of people in real life, and then just like see who's out there. I know like I still have my small community. Like I'm like with ETH Denver, I just see like these random posts from like, I'm going to ETH Denver, and I've never even heard of these people or these DAOs. So who knows what's out there? It'll be really cool to see. Really cool.
Adam, there's a question in the chat
yep.
that you should address.
Yeah, I see it. Okay, are there plans for migrating context ID data from a network of trusted nodes to a blockchain for stronger data proliferation and trustless storage? I know there are smart contracts for storing the verified nodes signatures, but will the data itself ever be on chain? So the data is on chain. And the nodes, so it's on an Ethereum compatible blockchain called ID chain, and nodes know how to read that data off the chain and build the graph. Processing that data doesn't get processed directly on chain, because that would just be computationally too intensive with all the graph traversal stuff that happens with it. So so what happens is it actually doesn't even use the EVM, even though ID chain is EVM compatible. It doesn't even use the nodes don't even use the EVM for that. All they do, they just use like a field in the headers for passing messages to each other. And so it's a kind of an interesting, it's an interesting model for an application. BrightID wants to be a world scale, and obviously like running that on mainnet and having like using all that data on chain, processing that data on chain would never work. But if you use a blockchain just for consensus, and you don't actually use the EVM, and you just have another system of nodes that are like custom tuned for the application, which BrightID nodes are. They have a BrightID nodes each run a graph database, and so they're specifically tuned for processing BrightID stuff, whereas an EVM would not be. That's a really interesting model, and I think that scales. I think that does scale to world scale, unlike most EVM applications could probably not scale to world scale. So that's our model, and also it allows ID chain itself to scale, because it doesn't like it hardly uses the EVM at all. So anyways, that's kind of how we do it. So I guess to answer your question, it already is on chain, and it's kind of, I guess you could say, trustless storage. It's a different set of trust, I would say. So if you're interested in the trust model for ID chain, there's I'll paste a link to the ID chain governance in there, but it's really interesting. Like, I really like the ID chain model. I think it's really cool. Basically, it's kind of like it's somewhere in between proof of authority and proof of stake, because so proof of stake basically says, okay, lock up a bunch of tokens, lock up a bunch of capital, and you get to help secure the network. And then proof of authority says, well, you okay, lock up your reputation. Basically, if you defect, everybody knows who you are, and you have basically just shown that you're a horrible person or whatever. But there's some problems with that, because like you could claim, well, it's not my fault, my computer got hacked or something like that. So I don't really totally buy into like proof of authority. So what BrightID does is it says, okay, rather than staking a bunch of what ID chain does is, rather than staking a bunch of tokens and locking up like trillions of dollars in capital or whatever, what you do is you lock up identities. So every person has one identity that they can use and burn or whatever, but what you can do is you can delegate your single use per lifetime identity to block validators, and you can say, okay, I'm gonna, the default is whoever sponsors you in BrightID, the first app that sponsors you automatically delegate to them. So for people who don't care, don't think about it, I think that's a pretty good default, that it gets delegated there. But it actually uses like Penrose style delegation, which is what the United Nations uses. So if you've got an app with 1 million users, it actually takes the square root of that. So you'd get 1,000 voting power. So that's similar to like United Nations, how they divide up the voting power nations of different populations. So anyways, that's kind of the default, but then you can always take your delegation back. If you're like, okay, I want to run a node, I want to run my own ID chain node, and me and my friends are going to stake our identities in that node instead of this other default node, you can do that, and you can stake your identity in there. And then what happens is, if your identity gets slashed, basically the voting power goes down by 1 permanently. You can never get that back. You can never delegate it again. And so the advantage of this is you get this thing that is like inherently valuable. Everyone has it. You don't need to be wealthy to have one. And so instead of locking up capital, you're locking up that. And so I think it's a really interesting model, and I would like to see it get further developed. So anyways, that's that's where the consensus is currently running. Consensus doesn't have to be on ID chain. It could be on any chain, or not even a chain. But the cool thing about that is it lets BrightID itself be an open network. Anyone can run a BrightID node because this consensus is happening on this other blockchain. So anyways, that's like a really long answer, but I hope that gives you some new information. That is the ID chain doc that a governance doc. So we still have a ways to go. ID chain is so the thing is, there's kind of a struggle there because it's basically free when you're locking up identities rather than other stuff. And there's no proof of work, no proof of stake. There's also no profit model, and so I think that's a really good thing. But it also means that people are like, why should I bother with this, because it's not going to make me rich. So Ethereum has that for better and for worse. It's like a lot of you've got this really highly valued gas token, but it also makes things really expensive, and then they have to solve that problem that they created by having an expensive gas token. So it's like, I don't know. It's anyways, it's weird, but that's the doc. You can read more about it. I hope people will adopt it. We'll see what happens. We're using it anyway. If ID chain grows to world, or if BrightID grows to world scale, maybe we'll still be using it. Yeah, I don't know what else we'll be using, because it's like none of the other chain, like we looked at, like Matic came to us and was like, hey, you should put BrightID on Matic. And like, I don't know what happens when you get like a world scale app on Matic. I don't know how that would work. So anyways, we'll see how this stuff pans out in the future.
So another question from Cody, and Cody, appreciate all these good questions. The folks in his community are new to Web3. They're not already on BrightID. They don't know people on BrightID. Do we have to send them all through meets? Can you do it? So I would say I definitely think there's the potential to get a seed group spun up for you. But what it requires is that you and whoever else is sort of going to be at the center of that process and be responsible for making those initial connections to those people. Basically, you'd have to run your own connection parties, and they can be just for your community. They don't need to be wide open to the public. They can be in your Discord. That's fine. You would just need to be sufficiently trained up to be able to answer their basic questions and run that process for them.
Yeah, so we just set up just to give an example, we just set up a seed node for SongaDAO. They just started having kind of like community hangout meets once a week. I think there's one actually happening today that I'm going to show up to. But yeah, yesterday I trained someone from their community on how to do that. Yeah, like it's pretty simple to run a BrightID connection party. So for 5 minutes, every time they have one of those meetings, they're going to say, hey, if anyone wants to make a BrightID connection to help you get verified, we're going to do that right now. So it doesn't take long. Everybody makes a group connection. Then if you want to explain more about BrightID at that time, you can, or you can, refer them to our Discord to get support. We're fine with answering people's questions. So yeah, I mean, how it works is kind of up to you, but Philip said that it doesn't have to be open. I agree that it doesn't have to be wide open, but I do think that it should be sort of accessible. Like one of the questions we ask in the seed form, which I posted for you, which you can fill out. That seed nomination form, if you scroll up, I thought I posted it. Maybe I didn't. Let me post it again. So seed nomination. Oh yeah, I didn't post it. Let me get that for you. Yeah, so one of the questions it asks in there is, where can we find the community? It asks who is the community, then it asks where can we find the community. It says, please link to the community platform, example, Telegram, Discord, GitHub, etc. Where and when do connection meetings take place? So, you know, if it's an app where connections are happening as part of the app, that's something that you could talk about. Or if there's like some other place where people will meet each other, but it gives you the flexibility to design your own way for people to make connections. So that's kind of what a seed group does. Yep. So here you go. Here's the. Okay. Is it possible to have connection mechanism native to our app? Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Hold on.
We can help you with that.
Theoretically possible. No one has come close to doing that.
I'll tell you why.
I would not encourage, like that's not the way to get spun up and started.
I'll tell you why. Okay, so I'll tell you first. I'll tell you the closest thing that we have to that, and then I'll tell you why people have tried and failed to do that. So the closest thing we have to it is Discord, BrightID unique bot in Discord. So some projects, this is like the easiest way to start using BrightID. I think it's on, I don't know how many thousands of servers actually, and I don't know how many are like just toying with it, and I don't know how many are actually like really using it. It's just too many to keep track of. But you just invite the BrightID Discord bot to your server, and then when people get verified through whatever connection process you have, then they just they go to that bot and it gives them the role. And so that's like the easiest possible integration. And then what people have done with that is they've linked it up with Collabland so that they can control DAO voting. They've like airdrops, sorry, and other giveaways through and polls for voting, like DAO voting and things like that, through their Discord by verifying people with BrightID through that bot. So they just invite the bot to the Discord. So that's pretty cool.
That doesn't have any connection making ability. It still requires the person to use the BrightID app.
Right, you still have to use the BrightID app, but that is still like, that's a really like easy thing. So for people who have tried, so let me give an example. There was a community, I think it was like a museum or something in New York, that wanted their visitors to basically make connections or some sort of like proof that they were there or something like that, and then be BrightID verified so that they could qualify for giveaways or something like that. So anyways, and they didn't want to have people install a different app. They didn't want people to install BrightID. So we started down that path, and then what we realized was the problem is, if that museum does that, and then like some other app over here does that, and some other app over here does that, then people are they'll get a new BrightID with this app, they'll get a new BrightID with that app, they'll get a new BrightID with this app, and there's no like coordination point that links all those together. And that's kind of what the BrightID app is it's that coordination point that says, I've got my one BrightID that I'm using for all these apps. I'm going to link this one, I'm going to link that one, I'm going to link this one. And it's kind of like what Billy said, which was his journey, which is really cool. It's like you connect to that first app, and then you learn, well, hey, there's these other cool apps. And that totally validates the sponsorship model of BrightID, which is how we fund it as a public good, is that it allows your app to be discovered in the BrightID app. So that's actually a selling point, and a reason why you might want to use the BrightID app is because you might get more users than you otherwise would by being in the BrightID app registry. Like someone might come along who maybe use BrightID for Gitcoin, they see your app in there and they're like, oh, cool, I want to link to that one. So they click on it, it takes them to your website, and they learn more about your app, and then they link that one as well and join your community. So there's kind of pluses and minuses. I can definitely see, like, that museum app. I totally get why they don't want people to install BrightID. Totally get that. And that's kind of like why we hit a dead end there, is because like it fragments your identity, unfortunately. People have no connection to begin with. Would it be possible to streamline the migration of users to the app once they decide to utilize their ID for more services? Yes. No, don't worry. This is like totally, these are really great questions, so don't feel bad about asking them. Yeah, so that is definitely something that we've recommended, and that's an approach that a lot of apps take. Is they'll say, okay, you don't need BrightID to get the basic level of whatever. You just you can sign up. You don't need BrightID to sign up. You can get like this basic stuff, but then when you want to get this extra bonus or whatever, or you want to unlock a certain feature, then you go use BrightID. So like that's what Gitcoin does. That's what I think that's what a lot of apps that integrate with BrightID.
Adam, I'm reading the question a different way. I'm reading it as, could they start, if they're starting their BrightID journey, could they start in his app and only upgrade to the BrightID managing, being able to use other apps once they've already started within just his app? I think he's wishing he didn't have
so
that
that sounds really cool. The tricky part is how do they the tricky part is they've got to know that they were using BrightID somehow, so that then when they come back and use use the regular BrightID app, they've got to realize, oh wait, I'm already using this app. I already have it installed. So I should link it. Yeah, I should link it and like change the BrightID I already have to use my existing BrightID, like somehow merge them. I think that's I think that seems like a good user flow. But yeah, I have to think about that more, how that would work. But that could potentially be yeah, I could see that working maybe. Yeah, I'll think about that more. But yeah, let's definitely talk about that some more, because it's interesting. So does your app have connection making in it? Yeah, integration channel and Discord. That's a good place to discuss. Yeah, let's talk about it in there. So Cody, does your app have integrated connection making in the app?
Yeah. Right.
Oh, it doesn't exist. Doesn't exist yet, but will it? Can
I take all the functionality from the BrightID app and like stick it as a piece inside of his app, so that they didn't have to download a separate one? That kernel of it would do all the BrightID stuff. That's what he wants, and that's a beautiful idea, but it definitely doesn't work that way today, and we don't have a way to gather up multiple instances, right? Because you can imagine a world in which on my phone I have 5 different apps. They all include BrightID functionality within them, and we need them to be able to all talk to each other, right? If I have museum app, yep, like there's the BrightID tab on it, and it lets you do all the BrightID things without having ever gotten the BrightID app. But yeah, it definitely doesn't exist today.
Yeah, so I think there's got to be some like middle ground where you don't have to install BrightID first, but you still have to be aware that BrightID exists, so that when you encounter it later, or if you already have it, for example, you don't make a duplicate BrightID. Or if you come across later, if you come across BrightID in some other app, you can know that like somehow you figure out that, okay, I'm using app A and I'm using app B. And then at that, as soon as I use app B, something like notifies me, and I don't know how this would work because we haven't built this yet, but something notifies me and says, oh, by the way, you're now using 2 BrightID apps. Let's merge your BrightID accounts, or let's not create a second BrightID for app B because we detected that you're already using this other BrightID app. We'll just use that one. So something like that. Okay, cool. Be willing to do development work. Sweet. Awesome. Yeah, let's definitely collaborate on that. That sounds pretty cool. Yeah, I think our current model that we've been focusing on is get apps into the app registry, total transparency that people are using BrightID, kind of use existing apps to piggyback on other apps, bring the BrightID community to each new app so apps get the benefit of existing BrightID users, and it's like everybody knows that they're using BrightID. That's sort of like our current model, but this other one is definitely interesting, so I'm happy to explore that with you.
There's also a future fantasy world where there's not an app at all, that it's natively part of your phone, that like iOS or Android is managing sort of that process for you.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that's what the BrightID app is going to become. It's going to just become a manager that manages all your authorized devices, all your authorized links. It basically just, I mean, that's what it does now, is it pops up a message when you link an app and it says, are you sure you want to link this app with your BrightID? It's kind of the security measure to show you that you're cryptographically signing something. But that manager could be, it doesn't have to be that app like that. There could be multiple managers. And like Philip just said, that the OS could build in a BrightID manager into it. So yeah, I mean, that could definitely be the future. Okay, it looks like we're coming up on time. I'd like to thank everybody that came and participated. Really great questions. Hope to see you in the Discord and we can follow up and do some more. So, and for those that are going to ETH Denver, look out for Billy. He's going to be there. He's going to be the guy wearing the orange sweatshirt. So he'll be easy to spot. Make a BrightID connection and have tons of fun there. All right, guys, take care.
Thanks, folks.